Well, Sir Desmond Swayne is a former International Development Minister and a Conservative MP, and one of those who's been calling for lockdown to end, well, a lot sooner than later. Indeed, lockdown never to have happened. Sir Desmond Swayne, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. We've seen so much really, really good news in recent weeks. We have seen, incredible vaccination rates. The government could reach that target they'd planned for mid-February next week, even by this weekend. We've seen sort of 93% of over 80-year-olds getting the vaccine. The take-up of the vaccine has been off the scale, far more than the government had actually predicted. We've seen the vaccine be far more effective than many had predicted in terms of preventing deaths, hospitalisations, now also possibly preventing transmission and other people getting infected. We've seen death rates go down, plummeting since the peak in the early days of January. We've seen hospitalisation rates go down, the number of patients going to hospital, the number of patients who remain in hospital with COVID going down, the number of infections going down. And yet we still don't know what the exit strategy is. It's all likelihood that the government doesn't know what the exit strategy is. It's the 9th of February and we're not going to be told, not something going to start, but actually be told what might happen until the 22nd of February. Why do you think the government is delaying the decisions to be made and delaying telling us about those decisions until the 22nd of February?
Well, I don't know, but I can speculate. I speculate that they want to be absolutely certain and that they don't have to have yet another iteration of lockdown, so as to be absolutely certain before they lift the lid. I think the danger is, however, that we're losing the sense of urgency that we should properly have about lifting the lockdown. This is costing a fortune in terms of the impact on our lives and on the economy. In my view, it's essential that the government get on with it to avoid the danger of mission creep that we're constantly hearing. People are starting to talk about, actually, it's all about a question of reducing right down the number of infections or zero COVID or whatever. We must stick with the original aim, which was to ensure that the NHS could cope with the level of hospital admissions. So hospital admissions are the key. And the moment the government decides that the NHS can cope and operate efficiently with the level of hospital admissions, that is the moment to lift the lockdown.
But that itself is actually moving the goalpost, because originally we were talking about it was the deaths that was the issue. It was the health lobby that said, oh, actually no, but we're going to see continuation of people in their 50s and 60s in ICU, and therefore that's going to be a massive impact on our hospitals, and therefore we will need to stay in lockdown while that's still happening. Of course, we're going to be moving off a peak, but the expectation from the health lobby is, but if we come out of lockdown, then cases will go up again. And inevitably, unless we come out of lockdown sort of right in the middle of summer, cases will go up when people start moving around and mixing with each other again. Children go back to school. That is inevitably what's going to happen. And then, of course, the moment that happens, there'll be more demands for another lockdown, won't there?
Well, the danger is, having seen that this is something that people are prepared to tolerate, every time you've got a flu epidemic, you might be tempted to, hey, let's have a lockdown, get on top of it. That's why we must stick with the original plan. As it was sold to me last March, we were doing this in order to save lives by protecting the NHS. Because if the NHS couldn't cope, more people with COVID would die, but more people with every other condition known to man who would be hospitalised would die as well. It was to protect the NHS, and therefore it is hospital admissions that are the key. Yes, of course, if we lift the lockdown, if you put an end to our restrictions on human contact will ensure greater transmission. But given the number of vaccinations that will have taken place, that should not translate into hospital admissions that would overwhelm the NHS. And therefore, we've met the original aim. Mission creep is the danger now.
But this is it. There's lots of talk about, you mentioned people losing the sense of urgency, and there's lots of talk about a cautious approach. But of course, there's only seems to be caution about the threat of COVID as opposed to caution about the known threat, proven threat of lockdowns on people's lives, on children's education, on people's liberties, on people's mental health, their physical health. We know people are drinking more, people are putting on weight, people are getting depressed. I know loads of people who really coped really well last time around, the first long lockdown, and have actually really got their heads together, their act together, and they are absolutely at their wits' end during this lockdown because trapped in their homes by this cold weather as well, and the idea that there's just no route out, there's no hope. Children stuck in their missing school, probably at secondary school, all the way until April. There never seems to be any caution about the costs of lockdown, only about the costs of not locking down.
Well, I agree, and I think that's why we've got to up the ante. We've got to keep reinforcing the message of the damage this is doing to livelihoods, to people's mental health, to our children's education, which has been devastated, and all the other impacts that are taking place. That's the fundamental problem since the very start of lockdown, is the lack of there being a cost-benefit analysis. What was this actually costing in terms of the number of lives saved? And I think that's what's been absent. But I don't for one moment believe that we should start thinking of it in terms of lives saved, because then you enter into all those arguments about what is an acceptable level of death, why is one death of less significance than another, or whatever. Let's just stick to the target of hospital admissions. That's why we went into lockdown, to prevent the NHS being overwhelmed.
Can I just say though, again, when we say that one of the aims is protecting the NHS, no, that's a means, not an end. It's not my job as a Briton paying taxes and a user of the NHS to protect the NHS. It's the NHS's job to protect me where I choose for it to do so. Because again, I'm not required to take healthcare from the NHS, as no one is. But the reality is protecting the NHS is a means to an end, which is to keep more people alive if the NHS is overwhelmed. Protecting the NHS seems to have become an end in itself.
Well, first of all, it is the mission statement was to protect the NHS, but it's wrong, to save lives by protecting the NHS, because if the NHS cannot cope, more people with COVID die and more people with every other condition die. But the political reality comes down to this. Back at the beginning of March last year, when we witnessed what was happening in northern Italy with hospitals being overwhelmed, there was a political realization that we could not tolerate those scenes in the United Kingdom because of the status of the NHS as part of our psyche. As Kenneth Clarke once said, if the British people have a religion, it's the NHS and that it should be free. And I think that was the appreciation. We had to avoid those scenes, and so far we've avoided them. But if the government can be sure that admissions are reducing to a level where that is no danger, then clearly there's an urgency about lifting the lockdown, and I believe that should be done now.
Why do you think?
I believe it should be done somewhat earlier. But
why do you think that the Boris Johnson, who are constantly told by people within government, his instincts are all to end the lockdown, but he's being told by all of the health lobby that he must not do it. We constantly have warnings. I mean, there's always someone on stage with some more doom and gloom messaging. Why do you think that he is not willing to say, go on camera, do those press conferences, say, look, this is what we're being told by the health lobby. However, there are other considerations. This is what we're going to do. He's basically being taken hostage, as far as I can tell, by the health lobby, refusing to stand up to them. Why do you think he won't say, I'm sorry, as the Prime Minister, I've got to be concerned with more than just COVID deaths? Why doesn't he stop scaremongering the entire population? And people are going, oh my God, one death from COVID is too many. Do they say that about road traffic accidents? Do they say that about flu? Do they say that about diabetes? Do they say that about heart attacks? No, they don't. The fetishization of COVID, and I know it's a serious disease and I know it kills. I'm as concerned as anyone else about older people, but the fetishization of COVID has gone to an extreme.
Well, I agree, and I think we've lost the proper sense of proportion in that respect. But to answer your question about Boris, to be fair, he has resisted at every stage. At every stage, he has at least resisted the scientific advice, at least by delaying or by not implementing it fully. So he's at least attempted to have some recognition of the economic and costs to society. And remember, the scientists have been arguing, or the particular group of the orthodox group of scientists have been arguing from the beginning for a much harsher lockdown right from the start, and that schools should have been closed right from the start. Schools should have been closed earlier. We should have gone into lockdown earlier. All those arguments have been made and were resisted. I don't think they were resisted strongly enough. I don't believe we should have gone into lockdown at all. I think there would perhaps been better ways of managing the situation. But hey, we're a democracy and the government won the votes.
Yeah, indeed. Sir Desmond Swayne, I remember us living in a democracy. Sir Desmond Swayne, former International Development Minister and Conservative MP, thank you very much.